Church. Pastor Steve here with our Monday Minute for June 1st, 2020. I want to thank everyone, first of all, who was able to join us for our online town hall last Tuesday to look at the possibilities of what it might be to reopen and resume in-person worship. We're continuing to receive information from both the Wayne County Health Department and from our own insurance company, as well as the guidance of our bishop's office, as we're considering all the information and as we develop our protocols for potential return to in-person activities. So please continue to stay tuned as those situations develop and as our individual email announcements will come out, as well as checking our social media for that. This coming Sunday, we're going to be celebrating Graduation Sunday, and our Director of Student Ministries, Ali Belsky, is going to be bringing us the message for that this day. So we look forward to that even though we're not in person, we're going to be able to use the advantages of technology as we're able to recognize and to celebrate our high school graduates this year, as well as our Newberg Scholarship recipients. So we hope that you'll join us this Sunday for that special celebration. For today's devotion, I have to confess that it has been hard to find the right words to encapsulate what's been happening this week. We're still in the midst of combating a virus that has taken over 100,000 lives now in this country. 5,700 of those are here in Michigan. It's taken over 1 million lives around the world, and while that number has slowed down considerably by us taking the actions that we need to do to stay at home, we're still seeing escalated outbreaks again that are going to cost us more lives. Yet, this week, we're also reminded that the past sins of our world continue to revisit us. George Floyd is just the latest in a now too long list of people who have died at the hands of police for no other reason than being black in America. As protests have sprung up, we have seen too much violence and too much destruction, as well as those who, as the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota has stated, have shown up out of state specifically to wreak havoc in what started as peaceful protests. Then we see the mob mentality take over as things get out of control fast, and people unfortunately return to their baser instincts and lash out in anger. So again, I look to the one who many of us look to for our guidance and advice. And I'm reminded of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who told us that the scriptures call us not to return hate for hate. Hate cannot stamp out hate. Only love can do that. And darkness cannot overcome darkness. Only light can do that. But in his speech titled The Other America, delivered in 1967, 53 years ago, riots were happening in our streets then, and he reminded us that protests and the act of protests are language. And while he contemns the riots, he also says this: certain conditions continue to exist in our society which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn riots. But in the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it that America has failed to hear? He has failed to hear the plight of the Negro poor has worsened over the last few years. It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. And it has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice, equality, and humanity. And so in a real sense, our nation's summers of riots are caused by our nation's winters of delay. And as long as America postpones justice, we stand in the position of having these recurrences of violence and riots over and over again. Social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention. King was all too prophetic in that speech. But we must keep the dream alive. We as people of faith, as followers of Jesus, we must own that. As a white person, I must own and acknowledge my privilege when it comes to racial issues. And I must also own my own voice as a leader of the church, not to stand for it. Not just about individual incidents of police brutality that lead to protests and riots, but to the systems that we maintain in this society that create these conditions. A few years ago, I preached in a sermon that while we can send our people to mission trips in Appalachia, even to downtown Detroit, to other parts of the world, but until we put as much effort into changing the systems that allow for that sustained poverty, we will never escape it. Our Newburgh students and adult leaders have participated in Appalachia Service Project for 35 years, and ASP has been around for over 50 years now. And while that is to be celebrated of the people who are going out and addressing issues and doing good, it is also to be condemned that we continue to place band-aids over the wounds that creates the conditions of poverty in the first place. And how much longer have we done so when it comes to race? We must make the hard calls, and we must take on, the conventional wisdom or the excuse that, well, Jesus said the poor will always have with us. And we can substitute the word poor for racism, sexism, and any other isms as well in our society today. But in that, we always fail to see that Jesus was calling people to live in the moment for what he was about to do for the poor in his death and resurrection, as well as for the outcasts in a racially divided society that he also lived in. In 2 Thessalonians 3:13, Paul tells the church, "Brothers and sisters, do not be weary in doing what is right." And later in his letter to the Galatians in chapter 6, verses 9 and 10, he repeats that, saying to them, "So let us not grow weary in doing what is right, for we will reap at the harvest time if we do not give up." So then, whenever we have an opportunity, let us work for the good of all, and especially those for the family of faith. So as we go about this week, let us listen to the language that is being spoken. But let us also not be afraid, and let us not be weary about doing what is right. And let's use this opportunity to work for the good of all. No matter what people might try to say about us on social media or in politics, we are called to be creators of God's justice and of God's mercy, and to share that we are all one in Christ Jesus. We must speak up, and we must condemn what we see when we see it, and we must not stand for it. And we cannot be afraid to stand in solidarity with those who are oppressed, for it is together with our strength that we can overcome anything. I know that I have not done enough, and I must do more, and that we all must do more to transform this world into the kingdom of heaven. Black lives do matter. Let's have the courage to say so, and more so, the courage to back up our beliefs with our actions. I'll have more to say about these things in the coming days. Until then, God bless us all. Let us continue to be safe, and let us continue to peacefully stand for justice and to resist evil, injustice, and oppression in whatever forms they present themselves. Let's get about that work in Jesus Christ this week. Amen.